Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. This is your host, Tara Martini, along with the fabulous Becky McNattin. We are glad to have you listening as we live and share stories of mental health.
And Tara, you and I talk so often about how much we love words.
Yes,
you know how
we
much
do.
I love words. I know you as an English teacher love them too. I think we were just talking about this a week or two ago, words and how much we enjoy them. And I love deep diving into how we define words and use these to describe our life moments. And there's a word that has been coming up around me often recently. And it's gotten me thinking.
Okay.
The word, and listeners, the word is toxic.
Ooh.
Now, origins of this word were describing actual poisonous things. But society likes to take words and repurpose them, so we started using toxic in more figurative, even metaphoric ways, and now it's often used to highlight relationships, interactions, spaces, pretty much anything that is experienced as harmful. And the therapy world, the world that you and I live in, really took to this word to have more of a way to name experiences in our life that are damaging. And I think that this was maybe a way to give space to the moments and circumstances that truly feel poisonous to our sense of self, our psyche, our capacity to trust, even to actually feel safe. And toxicity started to seem almost synonymous with lack of mental wellness. So what do you think about, what do you think of when you hear the word toxic, Tara?
Well, I like what you just said about synonymous with the lack of mental wellness. That's a good one. What do I think of? I think right away that it has a negative connotation.
Mm-hmm.
So similar to its origin. And I think it is something you don't want to be. And I also think right away of it having a correlation with relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And
I learned something about the word toxic, even in just thinking about this show, that the Oxford English Dictionary's word of the year in 2018 was toxic.
Stop.
Yes, I didn't.
Really?
I didn't know that it was literally the word of the year then. And this was because at that time, the use of the word and a reflection from Oxford English Dictionary's perspective that the world seemed to be moving toward more extremes. Well, look at that. Here we are several years later. And it was right around then that I started to hear the word toxic a lot.
It is used so much and overused.
Yeah,
actually.
and a quote from a blogger, Alicia Beach, said, "I am beginning to believe that the word toxic is more like a defense mechanism against anything that triggers, angers, or hurts people. It gives an excuse to disengage with zero responsibility. Or it's a way of validating or removing yourself from the situation rather than dealing with the problem at hand."
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's like this word that feels truly multifaceted. And we talk about facets often on the show. But you highlight a beautiful thought on it makes us think about relationships, certainly makes us think about something we don't want to be. And then this quote had me thinking about how is it a way of hiding?
Well, I never thought about it that way.
You hadn't?
No. Hiding from it. Yeah.
Or a way of us kind of protecting against things that might hurt us, that activate us somehow. The blogger uses the word trigger as an excuse to disengage with zero responsibility.
Wow. That is a totally new way of thinking about it.
And here lies the show topic for today. Focusing on this whole, what is toxicity? How does it look? How do we use this word? And maybe, as I think lots of folks think, even Oxford English Dictionary, perhaps overuse the word.
I would agree.
How has it become a part of the way that we describe things? And from this particular blogger's approach, maybe a way to hide or avoid things. Super interesting topic. Right now, we're going to take a short commercial break, but stay tuned as we further explore the word toxic and the impact this has on our mental wellness. Thank you for listening to Feels Out Loud. We will be back in just a moment.
yourself. Express yourself. Express yourself.
Welcome back to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. I'm Tara Martini, along with Becky McNattin. Let's dive right back into our discussion on the word toxic to describe experiences and relationships.
All things toxic. Tara, in our last segment, we were talking about maybe some of these different facets of the word. What do you think we're trying to get across by using the word toxic? And in that, I could tell in your face as we were talking that you were having like maybe 100 thoughts. So you could certainly reflect on those too.
I literally was having 100 thoughts, and I was trying
know each
so
other
hard.
well.
Yes, I was trying so hard to focus, but it was like, yes, there were too many things going on. What I think we're trying to get across by using the word toxic is that something is unhealthy or not good for me. The 100 thoughts I had, one of the main ones was, it stuck with me, was the idea of we choose to avoid or, not dive into. And I kept coming up with this example of friendship, right? Or if we're dealing with a client or a conversation with one of our children who says, oh, I'm not friends with that person anymore. They're toxic. Mm-hmm. How many of our clients or children or peers, whatever, any
us
age,
even.
Yes,
yep.
us, will avoid putting the work into fixing that or mending it or making it better by just simply saying it's toxic and walking away rather than choosing to do the work. Mm-hmm. So it's that easy out. Oh, well, it's toxic. And then they're using that to define the whole person. Mm-hmm. Rather than maybe they're not toxic, but there's one facet that is unhealthy or toxic. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean the entire thing. Where, like you said at the very beginning, that origin of it being poisonous. Oh, wait, It doesn't mean the entire person then is poisonous. It's just one small thing. It doesn't mean it's going to seep into every facet of the entire person.
Yeah, good point.
And I think that's important to remember is don't think of it as the easy way out.
Very good point.
So let's look at how the word toxic is used to describe different things in our world. Mm-hmm. So the first one is people. So, which this one we hear a lot of.
Yes.
This person is toxic. This celebrity is toxic. So, people, individuals who are negative, cruel, easily angered, disrespectful, and abusive. Maybe they even exploit others.
Yeah.
For listeners out there, as we're going through this list, you may have someone's name or coworker or someone pop into your head.
Yep.
So and then if you do, like, think of those traits, right?
Yes.
And really reflect on, what are the traits of that person and how do those impact your world?
Exactly.
Relationships. Toxic relationships are...
Yeah, you highlighted this.
Yeah. Interactions that are really unhealthy for us. And it's not just my friend and I got into a fight. Right? That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about that the whole relationship is just unhealthy. Maybe it's one-sided or causes us to really change ourselves in order to engage and or participate in that relationship in order to make it function. The other one is environments, and we hear this one a lot. It's a toxic work environment. It's a toxic social environment. There are settings that are full of contempt, ill will, meanness, injustice, and exploitation, perhaps even overly or constantly negative.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And that's where you're going to see where morale is low, productivity is low, if we're talking about work environments or learning environments. Frameworks. A toxic framework is like a need to be positive all the time, no matter how difficult a circumstance might be. We call it toxic positivity, which is like an oxymoron.
Right. Well, yes.
Yeah. It's a focus on everything being fine. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. And minimizing any challenging emotions. Just like we kind of talked about the avoidance piece, right? We're going to minimize any challenging emotions because we're just going to focus and say everything's fine.
Yeah. And in a workplace, toxic positivity might make a toxic work environment because there might be, we're going to discard anyone who sort of challenges that anything is short of amazing here.
Yep, exactly. And then lastly, something that maybe a lot of our listeners may not have thought of before or heard are gender roles specifically. We describe masculinity that is rooted in highly stereotypical beliefs about gender.
Yeah, it seems like people are saying toxic masculinity a lot right now. And you and I are definitely aware that there are moments, people, places, relationships that absolutely are toxic. Even moments that, as you talk about, fixated on being perfectly happy and content when the situation is anything but that.
Yes.
So we aren't saying in this show that these circumstances don't exist. And we won't even get into all the facets of each of the types of toxic concepts because they're probably whole shows. So we could do a whole show on toxic workplaces. Maybe we will. But we're focused specifically on the use of the word toxic to describe them today and what we're meaning when we say it. Because sometimes when we use words so much, we lose sight of what we're actually saying.
Well, and it loses, not only do we lose sight on what we're saying, but it loses its strength.
Yes, it even dilutes because we might be using this to describe an intensity of not very intense all the way to something that is very intense. So certainly toxic places, people, relationships, environments have gaslighting, manipulation, disrespect, abuse. Have you had experiences with toxic in any of these ways that you mentioned or I just mentioned, Tara?
I have.
I would guess all of our listeners have.
I was just going to say, I think anyone who is an adult sometime in their life has had an experience. My example was from, we've all had jobs in our early 20s where it's like not going to be your career, but you have a job to survive, right, and get you through college. And I worked in a environment where I was working with youth, and the work environment was so toxic and unhealthy. And there was favoritism, and there was just unhealthy norms. And here's me, this person who's all about like doing the right thing and just the idea of there being injustice and me not be okay with it. So, of course, me also who can't keep my mouth shut, like went to the person and was like, this is awful and we can't tolerate this and whatever. And guess what happened to the person who's all about like, I'm not going to stand by and whatever. They said, well, you can leave.
And that happens. And maybe that was a gift in the end to you.
Didn't feel like it, girl.
Did not feel like it in that moment. Yeah, I want to think about that. That leads me to this question of how can the word toxic be helpful? It might not be in the moment because as sometimes even recognizing that something is toxic is painful by itself. Certainly that story and how it ended probably did not feel helpful for you.
No, but it in the end, and I would say, like you said, in the end it was a gift because I thought I recognized the unhealthy environment and the traits, and rather than just sit by and be silent and go, I'm just going to put up with all this negativity and unhealthy norms.
Right.
I'm going to stand up for the people and for myself and be like, listen, this is not okay. I'm so glad I did it. Was I upset about how it ended? For sure. But in the end, I'm so happy I am not in that environment.
Yeah. Well, and you are kind of illustrating something that when we have a word to describe something, And maybe you didn't know it then.
I was going to say, I certainly did not use the word toxic when I was 21 years old.
No, but for people who even are listening now, who maybe haven't really thought about something as toxic, sometimes having a word to describe it normalizes it in a way that we don't feel alone in our experience. Because if there's a word for it,
yes,
that means there must be more than one person, which is us, who has lived it. Like, oh, this is toxic. And I think sometimes in the therapy realm, this is part of what we help people recognize. By using words to describe a circumstance, it can be really helpful to all of a sudden see something in a certain way of, oh my gosh, this workplace or this relationship or this person is actually poisonous for my psyche.
Right. And it's meaning making, and it's all, these things of when there's a word for it, it creates all these other things. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's amazing.
We also realize that it truly is like poison. That toxic experiences can be to our mental health.
Yep.
We highlighted that at the beginning of the segment, that toxic causes distress. It really does. And maybe in your example of where you were working at the time, you didn't even fully know it.
Right.
I think sometimes when we're immersed in toxic, we don't even know that we're living, breathing the distress. But it's incredible that right now, maybe in the use of the word toxic, I love the strengths-based side of this, is that we're talking more openly about the impact that harmful relationships, harmful interactions, what that has on us, what that does to us. It's so cool to me that we want to work toward mental wellness and are seeking ways as a society to notice more effectively how to promote it.
Well, and like you said, too, you don't know when you're experiencing it. And like you said, the impact, it can be physical and mental, right? If I think of how I did when I was that young, right, in college, how my stomach would be in knots and I'd be anxious to go to work, I probably didn't think of the physical impact. Like, oh, I feel that way because of this toxic environment. And then the mental impact of I wasn't as confident going into it, even though I knew I was good at working with kids. That's what I was going to school for. All of those things, it impacted, where I was doubting myself because, again, of that environment that was so unhealthy. It was the gaslighting and different things like that, which, again, I didn't even know that term back then. Was that even a term back then?
I don't know.
Anyone used? So it's all those things that you just don't know when it's happening.
So certainly some really cool things on using the word toxic.
Yeah.
And that we could take a thing that was truly defining something as poisonous and saying, hey, that can help us create awareness around harmful behavior. It may be empowering people to name it and take action around it. How would you say it's been not helpful? How is using the word toxic not helpful?
I think people use it. It's not helpful because people can choose to avoid. I think people use it so much that the heaviness, the weight of it is almost, or it's less powerful.
Yeah, well, you said that a couple minutes ago, that if we say it a lot, we risk it losing its meaning. That if we, and we've talked about this on our show before, if we reserve something that's a really intense word, we're talking about poisonous here. If we reserve that for the times that it actually is that, we know what it means. But if we use it for all sorts of things, including our own avoidance, we risk losing its meaning. And the quote that from the beginning of our first segment, I think one of the ways it hasn't been helpful is it has maybe become a way to dismiss or end relationships. It allows us to rationalize something as bad in our head. We can say oh, that was toxic. Without having to consider how complicated or complex a situation is. And at least I would love for you to weigh in on this. To me, there's a difference between when something is truly harmful to us and when something is deeply uncomfortable. There are times when our immediate self-protective response is to label something toxic and then just remove it from our lives and minds. And those are really different things to me. is it truly harmful or is it deeply uncomfortable for me? And what are the moments?
I think they're two very different things. To me, and we could look at this very differently, to me, harmful has a very negative connotation. It is not something that is right for me. It's something that is not something that I should be pursuing. It's not something that should be a part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
If I continue doing it, it's going to negatively impact other areas of my life. Something that is deeply uncomfortable doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing for me.
Right.
Deeply uncomfortable, to me, and maybe this is just more of a therapeutic thing, deeply uncomfortable means I'm doing something right.
Mm-hmm.
Because I am in a situation where I am digging deep, or I am being vulnerable, or I am doing the work. Is it an feeling to be deeply uncomfortable?
Mm-hmm.
Very much so. Mm-hmm. But it shows that I'm being present and I'm doing the work.
Right. Oh, you what you're talking about is that if using the word, and this would require us to do some self-reflection, but using the word might cause us to avoid taking accountability or responsibility for our own actions. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're noting right now. That use of this concept might cause us to skip that self-reflection and what that stretching feels like of being deeply uncomfortable, and maybe even miss out on repairing a rupture in a relationship if we just sever something or cut it off. And so even when they're super uncomfortable, sometimes these deeply uncomfortable places are spaces to grow.
They are.
Personally, in relationship, maybe professionally. And it causes me to question, are we hiding from the fact that relationships are super hard?
Mm-hmm. They are hard. And that doesn't mean they're wrong. Hard doesn't mean toxic. It doesn't mean bad. And I've used this line how many times? The idea of, if we want a relationship to work or a friendship to work, we have to be willing to have hard conversations. We have to be willing
to sit in the hard. The time.
Yeah. You have to be willing to sit in the hard and the uncomfortable. And if you're not, then how much does that friendship or relationship really mean to you?
Totally. Well, you have me thinking, too, about this idea that if we consider relationships toxic, and we use that word a lot, could it lead us to not sharing part of ourselves for fear that we might be labeled as that, too?
Oh, girl.
What?
That's a great
What component of, if we start to use this so often that things are toxic, could it lead us to not taking emotional or psychological risks in a relationship or addressing hard relational topics because we don't want to be viewed as toxic?
That's a really good point.
Then are we scared about, well, I don't want to be a toxic person. Right. You said that at the beginning of the show.
Yeah. And then out of fear.
Yes.
You don't go deep.
I'm going to stay in safe spaces because I don't want to be the toxic person to someone else.
That's a very valid point. So just go shallow.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I want you to read Katrina Prager in her article, Calling People Toxic is Toxic.
I love the title.
I love the title.
I love the title.
Will you read it to us, please?
Yes. Yes. Do you know that when you Google why people are toxic, the first 24 results you get is how you should cope with toxic people? Not a word about them or why people act a certain way. Just hits about the toxic people affecting you to soothe our perennial inner sing-song of victimhood. You know why? Because this excessive and gratuitous use of the word toxic has surprising little to do with the people in question. It's not about them. It's about you. More explicitly, it's about finding another problem in your life, another reason why your life is less than satisfactory. And that's where I start asking questions.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And segment. Katrina Prager has a lot to say about how calling people toxic is toxic itself.
Yes.
What did you think about as you were reading it, Tara?
Well, I really like this lady.
She thinks and ponders intensely.
I like it. Well, it just makes me question, as I was reading it aloud, it was also making me think like, oh, wow. It really hit about where it said, you know why? Because this excessive and gratuitous use of the word toxic has surprising little thing to do with the people in question. It's not about them. It's about you.
The impact that that's having on you.
It's about finding another problem in your life. Another reason why your life is less than satisfactory.
Yeah. Well, this whole statement had me thinking through, maybe before we use the word toxic. Now, we're talking about seconds, everybody, because words come out of our mouth really fast. But before we use the word toxic, are there some things that we could think about to have it be intentionally used? And so I came up with some questions that I would love for people to think about, and I want you to weigh in on, Tara. So before we use the word toxic, is there a pattern present? Is this a one-time occurrence? And whatever I'm noting about just using the word toxic to describe a relationship, a work environment, a place, a person, is there a pattern present? Is this a one-time occurrence? Have I communicated my needs? And you referenced this a little earlier too, Tara. Have I taken a note of what my either role or need is in this circumstance? Is this situation at hand repairable or not? Have I sat with how I feel? Have you sat, everybody, with how you feel before you've named it toxic? And then have you named those feels? We've talked about in other shows how to name those feels. Are there more than two options, toxic or not toxic? Are there more than two options there? And do I know why I'm using the word? You and I talk about this all the time. Do we know what's at play here? What's the function of the use of the word? And that might get at a little bit
What's the
even what the statement is of Katrina Prager in do I know why I'm referencing something as toxic? How does using the word make me feel? Is it helpful to me? And my favorite one here, is it toxic or is it relationally mismatched? Is it actually toxic? And you talked about this a little earlier, that is the person toxic or is this we're not compatible? Is this an oil and vinegar kind of thing that separately they aren't poisonous?
Right. They're just not a good fit.
But they're not a good fit. And that could be a workplace. That could be a relationship. That could be an interaction. It could even be a worldview. Or is it is it a mismatch? So what do you think about these questions?
Well, I think what you just said there lends itself so much to something we talked about on quite a few of our first episodes about when you said, is it toxic or is it just a relationship mismatch? Where I think that's the difference between leading with judgment or leading with compassionate curiosity. If you lead with judgment, you're going to assume or come to the conclusion it's toxic. If you lead with compassionate curiosity, more than likely you're going to come to the conclusion that, you know what, it's just a relational mismatch. The other thing that I thought of right away was, I think, to me, one of the most, if not the most important questions and there's a reason it probably was the first question that you come up with, is there a pattern that is present? Or is this a one-time occurrence? And it goes to the point that I brought up really early in the episode, is that are you saying this person is a toxic human based on one isolated event where it's just like, oh, one little piece of that person is unhealthy, and then you've taken it and gone, oh, the whole person's poisonous? Or is it truly where there's this pattern that has established itself, and in reflection, you're going, oh, wow, okay, yep, then that's indicating, okay, this is an indicator that this more than likely is toxic.
I love that, because it's, and to the second question of have I communicated my needs, in that pattern that you've noticed, have you ever shared what it is that you need from that workplace, that relationship, that person? You know, certainly you and I have talked about how someone else might be coming to a moment that we all have a story, and we might say, gosh, that person is just toxic positivity straight up all the time. Well, one option is that's masking. Something's going on in their world that they're utilizing a tool. Now you get to decide whether or not that is healthy for you to be around or interact with. But we do have a role in whatever circumstance we're in around, like, have I shared anything about myself? And definitely in some circumstances, if that's not safe, that would tell us something to begin with. Have I communicated my needs? No, because that's actually scary.
Right.
But it's something for us to think about. If we haven't shared something and we're labeling it as as toxic, food for thought there.
Going off of that food for thought, if I haven't stated my needs, like you just said, Becky, because I don't feel safe enough, that's one thing, because that's an additional indicator it's toxic. Or is it, have I communicated my needs? No, because I simply just haven't invested that much into it. That's a very different rationale for no.
It's a very, yes.
And then that, okay, well, let me communicate my needs. And if that breaks the pattern, and there is that room for an uncomfortable, like, deep conversation and room for growth in that relationship, then what you may find out is this was not, in fact, a toxic relationship, right? It was just a relationship that needed some uncomfortable conversations to take place, and an area for growth was discovered.
Right.
And it can be mended.
Yeah, and when you talked about relationally mismatched a minute ago, certainly that doesn't mean, and we're not saying that's void of huge hurt and big feels.
Yeah.
If let's say with a workplace that we come to, well, I don't know if it's toxic or if my value system does not align with the value system of this workplace. That might be an action step to, I need to move on. I need to do something else. That doesn't mean that this isn't super painful and very hard to do.
Right.
It's choosing then to reserve the word toxic for moments that feel that way for us.
Yeah.
And so thinking about that, how can we know if someone or something is actually toxic?
That's a great question.
Because
I think our audience is probably wondering the same thing.
And so you and I came up with a few different things on just stuff to ponder that might lead you to question, because bringing back to a spot of when it is helpful, this is helpful to name things sometimes. These are some things you might see or experience if something, someone, an experience is toxic. You read the first one.
So number one, on how we can know if someone or something is toxic, is there jealousy about other people's success regardless of hard work or merit?
Okay. Yes. Is there jealousy present?
Yep.
Number two, does it feel like sincerity is present in what is being said? So is sincerity there? Do you feel that?
Such a good one. Number three, is manipulation present?
And that can just be our perspective on that.
Yep.
Is manipulation present? Number four, how is conflict addressed? How is conflict addressed?
Number five, is there ever re-energizing or only depletion?
Okay. And that gets at that pattern that you talked about. Is this a one-time occurrence that you had a deeply depleting day, or does it feel like an always there?
Right.
Is it only depleting? Number six, is there lying to get what is wanted?
Wow. I feel like there's audience members who are going to be like, well, every single one of these just describe my work environment. So awesome.
Could be.
Let's hope not, folks. Number seven, is there a focus on the worst possible outcomes and then letting everyone know about it? What they're essentially doing is using fear as a motivator.
Wow. And I would guess that people listening have had that.
Yeah.
That's used as either a drive to get things done. It's used in relationships as a weapon, like I'm going to leave or I'm going to end this. Worst case scenario stuff. Number 8, does it feel like there is avoidance of saying what is actually meant and requiring people or you to pick up on the context of what isn't being said.
Can you say that one again?
Does it feel like there's avoidance of saying what is actually meant and requiring you or people to pick up the context of what isn't being said? Read in between the words. Sometimes in Minnesota we say passive aggressive.
Yep.
Sometimes we say, lacking in assertiveness of you're wanting me to hear the message that isn't being said out loud. So does it feel like that's present?
Number 9, how is responsibility taken for mistakes made? How are mistakes acknowledged?
Yeah, I guess, and maybe we could ask, is it?
Right.
Is responsibility taken for mistakes made? Are mistakes acknowledged? Is there space for that? And I've heard many people refer to workplaces, especially, that there's not room for mistakes. That there isn't even if you make a mistake, that would be back to the worst case scenario piece of maybe you're done. There's not a space for exploration there. Number 10, is there pot stirring without a conclusion?
Oh,
and
stirring.
And this might be pot stirring, gossip, talking about people, just like I would say, like creating drama or inciting drama for what feels like the sole purpose of drama itself.
Sad, like poking the bear.
Yes, not for bringing up a conflict that I really want to process and have some sense of resolution. Not for I've really been feeling this lately. Trying to kind of incite a feel.
Well, and lastly, number 11, what does vulnerability look like? And is it okay to not be okay?
Wow, well said. Yeah.
That's a really big one.
And that would get at do you feel like you can be you? It certainly has this essence of toxic positivity, how we might be describing that. Is it okay to not be all right, to be having a hard time? And then if you shared that, how is that received by the person, the relationship, the workplace? What are your thoughts on the list, Tara?
Well, the first thought I had was when we started reading it through, I was like, it reminded me of that old job in college. I was like, oh, yes, yes to all of these. But then my next thought was, as everybody knows, I work for Becky's private practice, and I thought it's amazing to work in a work environment that is not toxic, that is healthy, where we are allowed to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And we're okay to not be okay, where we are energized and all these amazing things. And I always said, I think I said this to you, like the first week of working for you, I cried because in tears of joy, because I was like, this is what it's like to work in a healthy work environment. Like, it's just the most incredible feeling. And I think for anyone out there who is an adult who's worked out in the workforce long enough, you probably do have, hopefully, you have an example of working in one environment and then working in the opposite, in a healthy work environment. And I'm sure you yourself, right? You think of a place you worked in that was negative and then positive, and how you are probably a different person in each of those environments.
Yeah, well, you bring up such a good point that I love. If you're hearing this list, listeners, and you are resonating as a yes to any of these things, or you find yourself thinking about something and maybe even for the first time sitting with, oh my gosh, I wonder if that is toxic in my life, that one data point can be think about a different relationship or a different workplace or a different memory. You bring up a really good way to consider this. That might be the opposite of that, as an additional space of like, well, what was that, and how do these things show up in that relationship, and maybe if you are, and how do you show up differently? Right, because that's what you said. You might be a different person.
Absolutely.
How are you showing up differently? And that might lead to, is there a person in your world then that if you're realizing something today as you listen that might be toxic for you, can you go talk to them about this? Get some perspective, a person who you feel safe with, that could be a therapist, but someone who you can say, what do I do about this now?
Right.
Is there a moment of action here? Is there a way to respond to this? Because now I see it, now I feel it, and now I need to do something maybe about it. This has been such a cool conversation. So much to think
cool.
about here. We are going to head to a commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to talk through listener questions, all about the word toxic. Feels Out Loud will process your questions and thoughts in just a moment.
Trying to find what you lost. You can't go it alone. Everybody needs to lose. In a world full of strangers, you don't know who to trust. All you see is danger. Trying to find what you lost.
We are back again with Feels Out Loud, and this is part of the show where we talk through questions from you, our beautiful listeners. If you have a question related to mental wellness, sharing feelings, or topics for each week that you would like us to process through, please visit our website at becomingtogethermn.com and find the Feels Out Loud page to submit a question directly, or email us at contact@becomingtogethermn.com. Of course, follow us on social media as well. We really do want to hear from you and what you are wondering about.
And we had some cool questions today about this use of the word toxic. And thank you, everybody, to those who have submitted something for us to ponder as a group today. And I love the first question because it's super simple.
It is.
Person says, okay, so what can I say instead? Mm-hmm. If I want to avoid the word toxic, what can I say instead? And I very much appreciate this because that means that there's a commitment here to, hey, I can use this, but I'm going to reserve it for the moments where I feel like something is toxic. What would you say, Tara? What should they say instead?
Well, I think there's so many options. And first, right away, I was like, oh, there's things like unhealthy, right?
Yep.
Negative, it's depends on, what they're comfortable with. But those are the first two that I thought of.
Yeah, my thought was, think about what are you describing? So to this listener, toxic is one adjective. Are there other things that you would say? Would you say gossipy? Would you say kind of back-talking? Would you say teasing? Would you say overly sensitive? Whatever it is that you're feeling in that environment with that person and that relationship, what are you actually describing? And use and challenge yourself to think of a word to describe that behavior or that scene or that memory.
Yep. And the other thing you can do too is, if you find yourself, if you're one of those people who overuses it consistently and you want to turn it into something that you almost have more of a lighthearted connotation, you can create like shorter terms. So you can just like the ick, right?
Yes, right, sure.
So
start to develop your own term of what things mean. Yes.
And then using toxic for the serious, truly
very harmful.
deep. Yep.
Yeah, and our second question for today, how can I set boundaries and limits in a relationship with someone who truly feels toxic in my life? When it gets to the space of toxic. And what would you say, Tara?
Well, I think one of them, it's so important in that my hope is that as you were feeling or sensing that it was getting toxic, that you set those clear boundaries and limits in it. It may be to the point, sadly, where it's so toxic that you may have to do more than just set boundaries and limits. I think, having a deep reflection on, is this a relationship that should continue?
Yes.
But making sure that, oh my goodness, those clear boundaries are set. But I think there needs to be both happening.
Yeah, I totally agree with that on how can you set boundaries. One might be write about what you see. First, what have you reflected on already is what you're noting in this relationship, in this workplace with this person. Have I stated my needs already? And if that hasn't happened, starting point. You also do get to decide if you feel like something truly is toxic, what does the action step look like? The action step can be ending something.
Yep.
The action step can be removing yourself from the experience and processing that with people who are safe in our world to get clarity on and what the action steps might be. As you just said, Tara, sometimes the boundary is something very firm.
And the biggest indicator of how toxic it is when you set that boundary or you state your needs, how is it received by the other person?
Good point.
And their response will really indicate to you how toxic this is or how toxic that person is.
Totally.
By how they respond to you.
Wow. End of our show already for today.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you for listening this morning, everyone. Join us next week as we talk through more mental health focused topics, and in the week ahead, everyone, be kind to yourself. Remember that connection fosters wellness, and your voice is one that the world around you needs to hear. Share yourselves, friends.
We fly, we fall, we get back up and try again.